I call the December 1st, 2020 regular meeting of council to order. Councilperson Dowling will give the invocation this evening.
Heavenly Father, we thank thee for this day. Help us to use good judgment for the business at hand and guide us in wisdom with a continuing sense of truth and fairness for the community we represent.
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America, and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Julie, please call the roll.
Mrs. Dowling? Here. Mr. Kirchner?
Here.
Mr. Krieger?
Here.
Mr. Landig?
Here.
Mr. Marn?
Here.
Mr. Blake?
Here.
Mr. Donovan?
Good evening. I want to welcome the public to this City Council virtual public meeting. If you are attending through the published WebEx link, you will notice a window open on the bottom right-hand side of the screen entitled Q&A. This window will have opened 5 minutes prior to the start of the meeting and will remain open for 10 minutes after the meeting begins for a total of 15 minutes. During that time, if you wish to address council at a later point in this meeting, please type your name, address, and the topic you wish to speak about. This is the only means for you to schedule your participation since the public cannot physically attend in person at this time. At the appropriate time during the meeting, I will recognize you and you will be unmuted. You will be permitted to make comments to council on the topic you requested to speak about. If you wish to comment on an item on the agenda, you will be recognized when that item appears on the agenda. All other comments unrelated to the agenda will be heard near the end of the meeting during the persons before council portion of the agenda. Please make your speaking request at this time and thank you for your virtual participation. Approval of minutes. Council, you received the minutes of the work session of November 17th, 2020.
Move to approve. Second.
Julie, please call the roll.
Mrs. Dowling?
Yes.
Mr. Kirchner?
Yes.
Mr. Krieger?
Yes.
Mr. Landig?
Yes.
Mr. Marn?
Yes.
Mr. Blake?
Yes.
Mr. Donovan?
Yes.
The minutes of the November 17th, 2020 work session have been approved. Council, you have also received the minutes of the regular meeting of November 17th, 2020.
Move to approve. Second.
Julie, please call the roll.
Mrs. Dowling?
Yes.
Mr. Kirchner?
Yes.
Mr. Krieger?
Yes.
Mr. Landig?
Yes.
Mr. Marn?
Yes.
Mr. Blake?
Yes.
Mr. Donovan?
Yes.
The minutes of the November 17th, 2020 regular meeting have been approved. And council, you also received the minutes of the work session of November 24th, 2020.
Move to approve. Second.
Julie, please call the roll.
Mrs. Dowling?
Yes.
Mr. Kirchner?
Yes.
Mr. Krieger?
Yes.
Mr. Landig?
Yes.
Mr. Marn?
Yes.
Mr. Blake?
Yes.
Mr. Donovan?
Yes.
Minutes of the November 24th, 2020 work session have been approved. Public hearings, we have none. Tabled legislation, ordinance number 20-0-075.
An ordinance amending the codified ordinances of the City of Mentor 2006 as amended, sections 1127.01, 1161.01, and 1161.04 to modify regulations and add definitions related to outdoor storage and display of goods and materials in commercial, industrial, and other zoning districts.
Mr. President,
Mr. Kirchner.
I would move to remove this item from the table.
Julie, please call the roll.
Mrs. Dowling?
Yes.
Mr. Kirchner?
Yes.
Mr. Krieger?
Yes.
Mr. Landig?
Yes.
Mr. Marn? Yes.
Yes.
Mr. Blake?
Yes.
Mr. Donovan?
Yes.
Council, what is your pleasure with this legislation?
Mr. President, I
Mr.
guess I
Donovan.
have a few comments on this and it's been going on for a long time and I just don't seem to have all the answers. It's not anybody's fault. I'm just trying to get the best product we could possibly get. And if these end up in our parking lots with lighting and cameras and painted parking lines and all that, I'm just trying to get the best product we can possibly get. And if council wants to jive in with me and see if we could come up with the best possible scenario for these. Maybe we even need to amend the zoning code to specify districts where these should be going. I know that's a hard thing to do. But I just seem to not be able to get all the answers I need. And I know it's taken a while. I can go through some of my questions. Maybe Mr. Zeman, Mr. Malachek, Kathy can answer them. They've answered them to the best of their ability up to this point. But I just don't feel like pushing this through at this time without getting the best product we could get and the best leverage we have to get the best product we can get. I guess what I'm going to ask is when these requests come to you, which I found out earlier, they don't come to us. I guess we're putting this language in these lockers on our own. It isn't a request from UPS or FedEx or Amazon. This is something we're putting in to make it more convenient for our retail and for the people who are shopping in the area to pick up and collect their packages and maybe even return packages. Somebody mentioned to me earlier. I just want to, do we want to amend the zoning code and put these in a specific spot? Do we want to nix this and not have these at all? Should there be limitations on these? It's just a bunch of language that I don't think's in there right now. And I'm just trying to protect our businesses, our people, and get the best, like I said, the best item we could get in that area. So I'm basically asking council, maybe Kathy and Kevin, can we, I know we can, we're council, we can amend the zoning districts where these go. It's just a tough thing to where, Tyler Boulevard and Heisley, I mean, legally, I'd have to ask Joe if we could do that kind of thing. And that's all I have. If somebody else wants to jump in and tell me how they feel about these,
Councilman Donovan, can I comment on that? This is Kathy.
Hi, Kath.
I just wanted to clarify one comment. You indicated that we would be putting them in, and that's not the case. We would only be putting them in at the request of a business that wants to put them in, such as an Amazon. That specifically was the business that had made a request last year. So it would not be the city putting them in. It would be the city approving them.
Yeah, I understand.
If they would go in as proposed.
I do understand that. I never got the word that Amazon contacted us to put these in. I thought this was something that maybe came up from economic development and planning and all that too, because other communities are doing it. I never had the information that Amazon actually contacted us and wanted to do this. So that's good. I mean, that's a good thing. But I'm just, like I said, trying to get the best product. I seem to be getting shot down on the part where why can't they come into some of these retail or empty buildings or places that could be leased 24 hours, lockers, cameras, security, the whole deal. Why can't they go inside, rent or lease a spot? I'm just having a hard time understanding that. I think it would be nice, very convenient. You go in, it's open 24 hours, cameras and lighting and security. I'm just having a hard time with dropping these in the different parking lots in the city. That's where I'm at with this. Is there any?
Councilman Donovan, is it unsightliness
Yes.
primarily?
Yes. Yep.
Mr. President?
Councilwoman Dowling.
Just a comment. I appreciate Matt's comments about an indoor facility, but if it's 24 hours, I think I personally would be more comfortable pulling up to a box lit outside rather than possibly going into an unoccupied building, late at night or after dark, just on my own. And I have to admit that with all of the online sales going on, there is a big need for it. I mean, I watched a wonderful article on Fox News on our Mentor Police Department tonight talking about package pirates, the porch pirates and everything like that. So, and I had an opportunity, I had to return something and I went to one of the UPS stores over the weekend And there was a line 16 out the door, and I wasn't willing to wait. So I was able to go over to one of our retail establishments that had it and walked right in and was able to do it. So I think there's going to be more and more of these returns and pickups. So I see the need. I just think that we need to set a high bar.
Mr. Kirschner.
Mr. President, thank you. President, for the administration, what would be the process now if someone came, if this was approved, if someone came before the city and asked for permission to put one in? What's the process? Where would they have to go for that approval?
Mr. President, can I answer that?
Go ahead, Ms. Mitchell.
So they would apply for a permit for review by the Planning Commission. We would take it in as a maybe at this point in time, I'm just thinking of a miscellaneous review, and it would be added. We would do the same process of review that we do for any other planning case that comes forward. We would discuss it by department and as an administration, and we would compile a staff report and present that to the Planning Commission at a scheduled meeting. If it were to be proposed as a conditional use, we would have to schedule a public hearing and notify any adjacent businesses or adjacent property owners of the proposed plan. And we would, again, make sure that any proposed locker would conform to the criteria we've outlined in terms of not exceeding the size, being approved at an appropriate location on site. The colors would be uniform and compatible with the structure and the rest of the facilities on site. And we would also recommend appropriate screening, not too much that it would, hinder access, but enough that it would, again, create more of a pleasing appearance. And then, for pickup boxes, require the security lighting and any kind of cameras, so that would also give a bit of assurance to those utilizing the lockers that they would have a sense of security. So, and then the Planning Commission would, of course, could add additional conditions and review it and then decide if they agree with the recommendation of the administration and vote on it that way.
Thank you. So then they wouldn't just be able to walk in and plunk a locker down somewhere. They'd have to go through the scrutiny of the administration as well as the Planning Commission. And while I'm not sure if I understood correctly, would it have to be a conditional use permit, or would it just be an approval pretty much based on conditional use permit stipulations?
That was one of the items that was considered at the last work session. So I had put together some potential language if you wanted to go down the road of going as a conditional use permit approval, which would again require the public hearing, but it doesn't have to go through that either. It does give that extra layer of review, and then in reviewing it from an impact standpoint. The only exclusion would be under item 7, and if it's those standard size drop-off only boxes, the ones that you see now, the single parcel drop-off that meet the parameters, the size parameters of no more than 3 feet in width and no more than 5 feet in height, then they wouldn't require Planning Commission review. That could just be done administratively, which quite frankly, they just go up themselves now without any kind of review.
So my thinking that if it did go the route of a conditional use permit, that would give council an opportunity, should they have an issue with it, to call it up.
Sure.
So that would be my recommendation, would be to add that as a conditional use permit. And I think you've already mentioned all the different stipulations that they would be required to meet under that code. So thank you.
Mr. President,
Mr. Blake.
may I interrupt?
I'll get to Mr. Filipiak shortly.
Okay. So actually, this is actually a question for Ken and Kathy. Since we've been talking about these drop boxes, I'm trying to make sense of who here in Mentor would find a convenience in picking up a package from a drop box as opposed to the front porch of the house. I could see drop boxes being quite popular in communities with a lot of rental units. And I know it's hard to predict what the future of retail, what direction that's going. I just don't see us potentially getting a lot of Dropbox applications coming. I mean, maybe I'm wrong because I don't know what the future holds in retail. But we may just be concerned about something that's going to be very minor. At my time on the planning commission, I used to give a lot of thought to the clothes collection bins that we had just being dropped in the city. A lot of those were cluttered on the outside. But I wonder how much use these would get if they came.
Yeah,
Any thoughts,
President, if I could, Mr. President?
Mr. Flibiak.
Just to respond to that, I think probably the most beneficial part of these is just the convenience of it for people who don't, perhaps they're working all day, they don't want that package sitting on their front porch. It's probably pretty timely because I'm sure everyone here has seen our most recent Porch Pirate program that the Mentor Police Department has a special patrol has started this year. And it's a real problem, but I think as much as anything, a good example, when I left for work yesterday morning, I looked at my front porch and there were 2 Amazon boxes that were completely soaking wet. I picked them up and the contents fell out. So if I'm unable to get home for a portion of the day, or I just want to make sure that package is secure or dry, that's probably the most frequent use of that. It gives convenience to the people who are doing business. And let's face it, we're talking about Amazon first on that list, probably, and maybe a few others as some of the big retailers like Walmart get into the online services business more and more. Just the comments that I wanted to make generally were, I think, and this goes to, I think, the points that Councilman Donovan was trying to make. We certainly share the opinion that we don't want to see these things pop up all over the city. I think we were trying to be very careful in the construction of this ordinance to place them so that while they're intrusive by their very nature, they'll be placed in a manner similar to what we do with ice machines and vending machines. I think one of the critical parts of this is in the ordinance. It mentions some of the rules that would apply to this. Among the most important is collection bins shall not be located between the main structure and the public right-of-way. So they're not going to be in the parking lot. They're not going to be in the front, right in view. They're going to be on the side of the building, and they're going to be screened on the side of the building. And much like the Planning Commission, the administration, and council has committed itself to over the years, we want to see that screening be compatible with the primary building materials or something that complements those building materials. I think Mrs. Dowling brought up a good point. Probably the only example of this that we have right now that I'm aware of is inside the mall right now. And that's a busy area and it's open during their normal operating hours. But after hours in an enclosed structure may invite some risks to people who are going there by themselves at night in particular. So I'm not saying that use isn't potential. I just think that it's an inevitability of the marketplace that exists today, that these things are going to be a part of life going forward. I think it's better for us to do our best to control them as much as possible, and that's what we tried to do there. At the last meeting, we endorsed the idea that they could be positioned as a conditional use. I think it's a good idea. Mr. Kirchner's point is a good one. If you didn't like it, you could call it up. And so now we have 3 layers of review here with administration, planning, and council. And, if something was an absolute monstrosity that perhaps was just completely misplaced or overwhelms a particular area, I think we'd know it when we saw it. So Ms. Mitchell advanced some proposed language earlier on conditional uses. We would be happy to include that. I think it's a wise move, actually. But I think to Councilman Blake's point, I don't think we're going to see a lot of these. I just don't think that there are that many retailers that would make it worthwhile, really.
And as Mr. Mitchell pointed out, I think there's almost a fourth level review with the adjacents being notified. If there are any unintended consequences that someone isn't seeing, those guys will come and make Planning Commission aware of it at that time.
President Landy?
President, go ahead, John.
Yes, Mr. Kruger.
Just a comment. I like what Councilman Kirchner said about the conditional use, but and somebody mentioned Walmart, and it's my understanding Walmart has partnered with Walgreens Pharmacy for for package delivery to those locations. I like the conditional use. I'd like to see that if they're going to move forward, Amazon, FedEx, or whatever, they have some locations, but maybe they could partner to solve the problem Councilman Dowling mentioned as far as security, partnering up with establishments that are open 24 hours a day, like Giant Eagle or some of the other facilities. That would solve the security problem and hopefully add help for those businesses. They're going to go pick up milk that night, they can pick up their package. That's my only comment.
Was there another request?
Mr. Landis.
Councilman Martin?
I guess question for Ms. Mitchell. Kathy, so we would use the CUP process, we would basically go the same route, whereas that we see that there's a problem, we contact them as a professional courtesy, we give them a certain amount of time for the problem to correct itself. If it's not a problem, then we pursue a little bit more heavier enforcement and then go from there. Is that going to be like the same gist of everything going forward, or do we need to also do something else to work compared to our traditional process?
Well, if they're violating the conditions of the approval, and we were to notify them of any violations, and if they fail to correct it, we could potentially then revoke the permit. I have that authority under the code to do that if they are in violation. So assuming that they are meeting those requirements and all is well, we won't have to take that measure. But with the conditional use permit tool, then we could certainly require that if it becomes necessary and revoke a permit.
Mr. Donovan.
I guess I'll go to Mr. Zeman on this one. Mr. Zeman, if we approve one of these in one spot and disapprove of another one in another spot, is there any legalities in that? Are we going to have a problem with that, or do we need language to say Walmart could have one and Giant Eagle can't?
Well, no, generally, you're looking at apples to apples if you're concerned about a denial somehow, being discriminatory in some sense. The basis with the conditional use permit obviously is that you're looking at unique set of circumstances on a parcel by parcel basis. And a lot of those unique circumstances are, where is it located? What are the adjacent uses? Is there sufficient parking, adequate ingress and egress? Just the typical nuts and bolts. And the other thing that's nice about the conditional use permit aspect of that is that you can kind of examine, is it really compatible with the principal use on the parcel? It may be that these, there might be some types of establishments where you think, it doesn't make any sense to have these types of collection boxes next to a certain type of establishment, or where they might be in close proximity, for example, to a residential area. Who knows what those might be? Obviously, those are just ideas off the top of my head. But generally, no. As long as there is a rational basis for the denial of a conditional use permit, you're going to be in good legal shape. And I think the Planning Commission has been very good about articulating bases, not just for denials, frankly, but the reasons they approve certain uses where they do.
Thank you. I guess we're at this stage now where if we wanted to add these conditions into this, we'd have to do it. Kathy, do we have these conditions in that we're talking about already? The conditional use permit, all the leverage we can get.
I would refer automatically to the conditional use permit chapter, which has a set of general criteria, which talks about what Mr. Zeman just mentioned: impacts, compatibility, impact on the neighborhood, and so forth. So there's the conditions that we've outlined in section 1161 1604, and then the conditions, the criteria that is already outlined under the conditional use permit chapter. Now, you had mentioned also about specific districts. At the beginning of section 116104, we say outdoor activities in commercial and industrial districts, including mixed use districts. I didn't know if council wanted to specify anything more than that and be specific as to where they're only permitted, or is it as general as all of the commercial and industrial districts and mixed use district?
I'm fine with that.
Mr. President,
Mr. Kirschner.
if we're going to add the stipulation, or I guess maybe for Joe, this might be a question for Joe, adding a language to include conditional use permit process. Joe, how would you recommend? That would be an amend this?
Correct. Yeah, the motion to amend, you've got the proposed language. I assume Ms. Schiavone already has that, and the members of the council have that in front of them. She's taking her head note. So,
would it be simpler just to put in the, to amend to include any activity would fall under the conditional use permit code?
well, I think the amendment, in order to be proper, has to have the specific language and where exactly in these revised new codes that it will appear. And I know Ms. Mitchell had produced that document, and if she'd sent it out, I don't know if it's, I don't know, Kathy, if you've got a timestamp or something where that document could be referenced in the record, and members of council can just amend it in accordance with that name of that document. That should suffice for purposes of the record to establish exactly the nature of that amendment.
Mr. President?
Mr. Donovan.
Kathy, do you have that document number if we wanted to amend it in front of you?
I guess just to clarify, I was talking about the proposed language that I sent out to President Landig and Donovan and yourself. Mr. Zeman?
Yes, it was a red text version.
Yeah, yeah. I can read exactly what it is.
Okay,
For the record.
I apologize. I thought that had then been forwarded to all the members of council.
No.
Okay.
Nope.
No, I presented it and I wasn't sure where it was going, so I left it at that, but I can.
Right, Kathy, we never responded back or approved it. Yeah, you're right.
Is there a
Well,
document
that may
number?
make it a little bit difficult. Is there any way to, I don't know, Mr. President, do you want to,
Mr. President.
I don't know that, it's not a tremendous amount of text. Hopefully it would be clear as to where it would appear. I think, Kathy, you may want to have a section number, subsection number, and then read the current language, and then actually highlight when you're speaking what is brand new. And then hopefully that would make a clear record, I would think.
I can certainly do that right now.
Good.
Okay, Mr. President?
Please, go ahead.
Okay, under section 1161.04, section F, self-service parcel drop-off pickup box or locker. The existing text reads a self-service parcel drop-off pickup box or locker, and the amended text reads, is subject to review and issuance of a conditional use permit by the Planning Commission. The proposed location for the box or locker shall be shown on a site plan in compliance with the following requirements. And then it goes right into the existing text that you already have, which is items 1 through 6. And under item 7, which currently reads, drop off only boxes 3 feet or less in width and not higher than 5 feet. And I've added the text, do not require a conditional use permit, and existing texts are not subject to review by the Planning Commission, but shall meet the location requirements outlined in subsection F1 above.
Mr. President,
Mr. Kirschner.
I would have moved to amend to include the language just cited by Ms. Mitchell.
Second.
Will you please call the roll?
Mrs. Dowling,
Yes.
Mr. Kirchner,
Yes.
Mr. Krieger,
Yes.
Mr. Landig,
Yes.
Mr. Marne. Mr. Marne,
Yes.
Mr. Blake,
Yes.
Mr. Donovan,
Yes. Mr. President, I'd move to suspend as amended.
Second.
Please call the roll.
Because we've already done the readings.
Oh, because it was tabled. I would move to approve as amended.
Point. Please call the roll.
Mrs. Dowling,
Yes.
Mr. Kirchner,
Yes.
Mr. Krieger,
Yes.
Mr. Landig,
Yes.
Mr. Marne,
Yes.
Mr. Blake,
Yes.
Mr. Donovan,
Yes.
Ordinance number 20-0-075 has been approved.
Thank you for your cooperation.
Thank
Good
you.
discussion, council. Appreciate it. New legislation, ordinance number 20-0-090.
an ordinance providing for appropriations for current expenses and other expenditures of the city of Mentor, Ohio for the period beginning January 1, 2021 to and including December 31st, 2021, and declaring an emergency.
Mr. Flippia.
Thank you, Mr. President. And we just want to express our appreciation to council for helping us get through this on I would say, a little faster track than in normal years, just because of the inability for us to gather together. But I think it worked out pretty well. We have not made any changes from the last draft the council has seen, and very open to any questions that you may still have.
Move to suspend.
Second.
Please call the roll.
Mrs. Dowling,
Yes.
Mr. Kirchner,
Yes.
Mr. Krieger,
Yes.
Mr. Landig,
Yes.
Mr. Marne,
Yes.
Mr. Blake,
Yes.
Mr. Donovan,
Yes.
Move to approve.
Second.
Please call the roll.
Dowling,
Yes.
Mr. Kirchner,
Yes.
Mr. Krieger,
Yes.
Mr. Landig,
Yes.
Mr. Marne,
Yes.
Mr. Blake,
Yes.
Mr. Donovan,
Yes.
Ordinance number 20-0-090 has been approved. Ordinance number 20-0-091.
an ordinance amending ordinance number 20-0-038 to extend the deadline for conducting meetings of council, the Municipal Planning Commission, and Board of Building and Zoning and Building Appeals by video conference during the ongoing state of emergency and declaring an emergency.
Move to suspend.
Second.
Please call the roll.
Mrs. Dowling,
Yes.
Mr. Kirchner,
Yes.
Mr. Krieger,
Yes.
Mr. Landig,
Yes.
Mr. Marne,
Yes.
Mr. Blake,
Yes.
Mr. Donovan,
Yes.
Move to approve.
Second.
Please call the roll.
Mrs. Dowling,
Yes.
Mr. Kirchner,
Yes.
Mr. Krieger,
Yes.
Mr. Landig,
Yes.
Mr. Marne,
Yes.
Mr. Blake,
Yes.
Mr. Donovan.
Yes.
Ordinance number 20-0-091 has been approved. Ordinance number 20-0-092. Mr. Flippia. Excuse me.
An ordinance to authorize transfers of funds, advances of funds, and revisions to appropriations and declaring an emergency.
Mr. Flippia.
Mr. President, Mr. Milano, please.
Thank you, Mr. Filipiak. Members of council, this ordinance is our year-end sort of adjustment to several appropriations. It firstly includes one permanent cash transfer out of the city's general fund to fund the payroll stabilization fund. Secondly, there are four temporary cash advances out of the city's general fund to fund, firstly, a capital projects fund that is moving very quickly, and three grants. Finally, in section 3, and I would request a good news amendment that was just discovered, or the news was just released, that we have a $40,000 coronavirus fund opportunity related to our Senior Citizen Center. Money must be spent by December 30th. So I would request an amendment to increase appropriations in section 3 by $40,000 to the coronavirus fund number 350. And predominantly, there's a net decrease to the city's general fund appropriations in the current year, incorporated into this section to realign our appropriations, and then several other funds, both increases and decreases to realign funds. And I would recommend the approval of the entire ordinance. Thank you.
Mr. President?
Mr. Kirchner.
Someone else? No, you're on. Oh, I'm getting an echo. Huh? I would move to amend this ordinance to include the language Mr. Malinowski mentioned in section 3.
Second.
Just discussion. Mr. Flipiak, there are ample opportunities for using this in a short time frame.
I believe so. Worst case scenario, we would turn back what we were on to use. It's a good opportunity. Came up quickly and we're at it. Again, that would be an increase in the coronavirus fund in the amount of $40,000.
Motion and a second to suspend. Please call a roll.
To amend. Mrs. Dowling? Mr. Kirchner?
Yes.
Mr. Krieger?
Yes.
Mr. Landig?
Yes.
Mr. Marne?
Yes.
Blake?
Yes.
Mr. Donovan?
Yes.
Move to suspend as amended.
Please call the roll.
Mrs. Dowling? Yes. Mr. Kirchner?
Yes.
Mr. Krieger?
Yes.
Mr. Landig?
Yes.
Mr. Marne?
Yes.
Mr. Blake?
Yes.
Mr. Donovan?
Yes.
Move to approve as amended.
Second.
Please call the roll.
Mrs. Dowling? Mr. Kirchner?
Yes.
Mr. Krieger?
Yes.
Mr. Landig?
Yes.
Mr. Marne?
Yes.
Mr. Blake?
Yes.
Mr. Donovan?
Yes.
Ordinance number 20-0-092 has been approved. Ordinance number 20-0-093.
An ordinance authorizing the city manager to purchase motor vehicle fuels during the year 2021 upon such terms and at such prices as are deemed most advantageous to the city of Mentor and declaring an emergency.
Mr. Flippy.
Thank you, Mr. President. Again, these next several ordinances we do at our last meeting of the year to allow us to get the most favorable prices, which are usually commodities that change on a daily and sometimes hourly basis. So we ask you for some discretion to negotiate best terms for the city.
Move to suspend.
Second.
Please call the roll.
Mrs. Dowling? Yes. Mr. Kirchner?
Yes.
Mr. Krieger?
Yes.
Mr. Landig?
Yes.
Mr. Marne?
Yes.
Mr. Blake?
Yes.
Mr. Donovan?
Yes.
Move to approve.
Second.
Please call the roll.
Mrs. Dowling?
Yes.
Mr. Kirchner?
Yes.
Mr. Krieger?
Yes.
Mr. Landig?
Yes.
Mr. Marne?
Yes.
Mr. Blake?
Yes.
Mr. Donovan?
Yes.
Ordinance number 20-0-093 has been approved. Ordinance number 20-0-094.
An ordinance authorizing the city manager to negotiate and enter into natural gas purchase contracts for municipal facilities during the year 2021 upon such terms and at such prices as are deemed most advantageous to the city of Mentor and declaring an emergency.
Move to suspend.
Second.
Please call the roll.
Mrs. Dowling? Yes. Mr. Kirchner?
Yes.
Mr. Krieger?
Yes.
Mr. Landig?
Yes.
Mr. Marne?
Yes.
Mr. Blake?
Yes.
Mr. Donovan?
Yes.
Move to approve.
Second.
Please call the roll.
Mrs. Dowling?
Yes.
Mr. Kirchner?
Yes.
Mr. Krieger?
Yes.
Mr. Landig?
Yes.
Mr. Marne?
Yes.
Mr. Blake?
Yes.
Mr. Donovan?
Yes.
Ordinance number 20-0-094 has been approved. Ordinance number 20-0-095.
An ordinance authorizing the city manager to negotiate and enter into electricity purchase contracts for municipal facilities during the year 2021 upon such terms and at such prices as are deemed most advantageous to the city of Mentor and declaring an emergency.
Move to suspend.
Second.
Please call the roll.
Mrs. Dowling? Yes. Mr. Kirchner?
Yes.
Mr. Krieger?
Yes.
Mr. Landig?
Yes.
Mr. Marne?
Yes.
Mr. Blake?
Yes.
Mr. Donovan?
Yes.
Move to approve.
Second.
Please call the roll.
Dowling?
Yes.
Mr. Kirchner?
Yes.
Mr. Krieger?
Yes.
Mr. Landig?
Yes.
Mr. Marne?
Yes.
Mr. Blake?
Yes.
Mr. Donovan?
Yes.
Ordinance number 20-0-095 has been approved. Ordinance number 20-0-096.
An ordinance authorizing the city manager to enter into a participation agreement with the Ohio Department of Transportation relative to the purchase of rock salt and declaring an emergency.
Move to suspend.
Second.
Please call the roll.
Mrs. Dowling?
Yes.
Mr. Kirchner?
Yes.
Mr. Krieger?
Yes.
Mr. Landig?
Yes.
Mr. Marne?
Yes.
Mr. Blake?
Yes.
Mr. Donovan?
Yes.
Move to approve.
Second.
Please call the roll.
Mrs. Dowling?
Yes.
Mr. Kirchner?
Yes.
Mr. Krieger?
Yes.
Mr. Landig?
Yes.
Mr. Marne?
Yes.
Mr. Blake?
Yes.
Mr. Donovan?
Yes.
Ordinance number 20-0-096 has been approved. Ordinance number 20-0-097.
An ordinance authorizing the city manager to negotiate and enter into insurance contracts during the year 2021 for and on behalf of the city of Mentor and declaring an emergency.
To suspend.
Second.
Please call the roll.
Mrs. Dowling?
Yes.
Mr. Kirchner?
Yes.
Mr. Krieger?
Yes.
Mr. Landig?
Yes.
Mr. Marne?
Yes.
Mr. Blake?
Yes.
Mr. Donovan?
Yes.
Move to approve.
Second.
Please call the roll.
Mrs. Dowling?
Yes.
Mr. Kirchner?
Yes.
Mr. Krieger?
A question before I vote. Mr. Filipiak, when was the last time we bid our insurance contracts out?
Well, actually, I'll turn that over to Mr. Malinowski.
Goes back a ways. If we're looking at medical,
No, I'm primarily looking at the property casualty.
property casualty liability, it's been probably a decade since we did
Wow.
a formal actual bid. We've solicited quotes from multiple carriers. And
Well,
we
that would be
continue to
bid,
do
wouldn't it?
that.
So our former provider, Mr. Krieger, we were with for probably 6 or 7 years. And then in the last 2 years, we have joined a consortium with other public entities, a pool, which has been very good for us. So while that's not bid out, we've certainly managed our cost through the pool.
Now, are you when you say you're in the pool, are you in the pool for medical, property and casualty, auto? I mean, what are we looking at?
Property, casualty, auto, all property, all city property. And of course, the city's health insurance is self-insured. We do look at renewals, and we consider on an annual basis the administration of our healthcare insurance on an annual basis. We have stayed with Medical Mutual, as council is aware, for many years now because their renewal rates have been favorable, and the discounts that they provide to us on healthcare service, I should say the discounts that they're able to negotiate with the hospital system have made that by far the best choice for us. So because we're self-insured on the medical side, the administrative portion is a relatively small portion of the cost. Probably what, Dave, maybe 15% at best of the cost.
So the property casualty, auto, umbrella, other ancillary policies are all within a pool?
Correct.
And so the pool does not get quotes?
Well, the pool is self-insured up to a certain point, and then of course they do insure and take quotes for co-insurance above a certain level.
Co-insurance is a clause within the policy. The self-retained limit, I guess I'm just asking, I mean, it seems like if we haven't bid this out, that it's something we should be bidding out in the future, at least to get some pricing.
Mr. President?
Mr. Blake.
Mr. Zeman, it's Mr. Zeman.
Oh, Mr. Zeman, sorry.
If I may, just from my experience with the law department, and we're currently with Public Entities Pool, PEP, there are some intangibles when you're dealing with insurance companies and they're providing defense coverage, and some of those intangibles are just how they do business and how they go about handling claims. For my judgment, PEP has been extremely good to work with. One of the reasons that, frankly, my budget is so well under control is how well they've been managing some of the cases that they provided insurance defense through. And so there are some intangibles, and whether or not, ultimately council decides to go out to bid for insurance coverage in the future, I would counsel to take a look at some of those intangibles and why those sort of direct negotiations can really produce fruit and pay off in ways that going out to bid would not. Thank you, sir.
Okay, Mr. President, just one other question. Who manages the pool?
There's a board of directors that's made up of representatives from the participating communities.
I thought we were dealing with one insurance agency, though, in particular.
Well, the city has an insurance consultant, which you're familiar with, Britton Gallagher, who helps us with respect to the policy and managing certain claims that are, I should say, for a lack of a better term, that require some management beyond what the pool representatives provide.
Well, I guess that's what I'm asking. So we deal with Britton Gallagher. They're our agent. Is that correct?
Correct.
Okay. I guess that's what I was getting at. All right. Thank you.
We have a vote on the floor.
Yes.
Mr. Landig?
Yes.
Mr. Marne?
Yes.
Mr. Blake?
Yes.
Mr. Donovan?
Yes.
Ordinance number 20-0-097 has been approved. Ordinance number 20-0-098.
An ordinance authorizing the city manager to enter into a contract with CDWG for the purchase of NetApp expansion storage area and declaring an emergency.
Mr. Flippy.
Thank you, Mr. President, to members of council. This is a budgeted item, and it is simply necessary for us to update our data storage capacity. We'll be purchasing approximately, exactly 100 terabytes of storage. And happy to answer any questions, and I believe Ali is on here as well if you have any particular questions.
Move to suspend. Second. Please call the roll.
Mrs. Dowling?
Yes.
Mr. Kirchner?
Yes.
Mr. Krieger?
Yes.
Mr. Landig?
Yes.
Mr. Marne?
Yes.
Mr. Blake?
Yes.
Mr. Donovan?
Yes. Move to approve. Second. Please call the roll.
Mrs. Dowling?
Yes.
Mr. Kirchner?
Yes.
Mr. Krieger?
Yes.
Mr. Landig?
Yes.
Mr. Marne?
Yes.
Mr. Blake?
Yes.
Mr. Donovan?
Yes. Ordinance number 20-0-098 has been approved. Ordinance number 20-0-099.
Ordinance authorizing the city manager to award a bid contract to Cornerstone Earthwork LLC for the President's Park Pathway Improvement Project and declaring an emergency.
Mr. Flippy.
Thank you, Mr. President. We're happy to bring this to you tonight. We've been, as part of our budget preparation, we always take a close look at what we estimate fund balances to be. And this was a project that we had rebid back in March. And if council may recall that the first bid, I believe, came at the end of 2019. It was a rather high bid. So we decided to forego that project and rebid. We got a much improved bid from the prior. But then the coronavirus hit, and we became quite sensitive, obviously, about large expenditures at that time that were discretionary in nature. As we get to the end of this project was originally budgeted out of the Community Rec Fund, and as you council knows, that is funded through admissions taxes and through hotel motel taxes. So what came into that was relatively little during the course of the year. But we were fortunate enough to end the year with a significant enough balance to allow this to proceed forward. We actually have had a good working relationship with the bidder, who has extended his bid from March twice. And we believe that we are in a good position. We're committed to doing the project. We think it'll be an asset to the neighborhood. And we'd like to move forward so we can get this started in the spring.
Mr. Fliviak, is the entire walking path going to be accessible?
Yeah. Mr. Swigger, you want to chime in on that, please?
Yes, the path will be accessible. It will be, it's a 10-foot wide path, paved asphalt path, so, and no steep slopes or ramps.
Thank you.
Move to suspend.
Second.
Please call the roll.
Mrs. Dowling?
Yes.
Mr. Kirschner?
Yes.
Mr. Krieger?
Yes.
Mr. Landig?
Yes.
Mr. Marne? Marne?
Yes.
Mr. Blake?
Yes.
Mr. Donovan?
Yes.
Move to approve.
Second.
Please call the roll.
Mrs. Dowling?
Yes.
Mr. Kirschner?
Yes.
Mr. Krieger?
Yes.
Mr. Landig?
Yes.
Mr. Marne?
Yes.
Mr. Blake?
Yes.
Mr. Donovan?
Yes.
Ordinance number 20-0-099 has been approved. Ordinance number 20-0-100.
Ordinance authorizing the city manager to award a bid contract to Huffman Equipment Rental, Inc. for the Menor Lagoons Park Marina Bulkhead Replacement Project and declaring an emergency.
Mr. Flipper.
Thank you, Mr. President. And this is, of course, a continuation of our goal of eventually replacing and repairing all of the dock wall that is needed. Mr. Swigger.
Thank you, Mr. Filipiak. 3 bids were opened November 20th for the Menor Lagoons Park Marina Bulkhead Replacement Project. Bids range from a low bid of $905.59 per foot of construction to a high bid of $955.75 per linear foot of construction. The lowest and best bid was received from Huffman Equipment Rental Incorporated of Eastlake, Ohio, with $908.00 per linear foot, whose bid was found to be in conformance with all contract requirements. The low bidder, Cornerstone Earthwork LLC, at $905.59, lacks the experience in sheet piling and marine work. Based on the per foot cost of construction received, the project could replace up to 551 linear feet of bulkhead along Dock D at a total cost of $500,000. The work will take place just west of the project that was completed this year. The engineer's estimated length of the bulkhead replacement for construction cost of $500,000 was 500 linear feet, or $1,000 per linear foot. It's therefore recommended that the contract be awarded to Huffman Equipment Rental in the amount of $500,000. They are experienced and qualified in this area, and the scheduled completion date for the project is March 26th of 2021. Thank you.
Council, what is your pleasure?
Move to suspend.
Second.
Please call the roll.
Mrs. Dowling?
Yes.
Mr. Kirschner?
Yes.
Mr. Krieger?
Yes.
Mr. Landig?
Yes.
Mr. Marne?
Yes.
Mr. Blake?
Yes.
Mr. Donovan?
Yes.
Move to approve.
Second.
Please call the roll.
Mrs. Dowling?
Yes.
Mr. Kirschner?
Yes.
Mr. Krieger?
Yes.
Mr. Landig?
Yes.
Mr. Marne?
Yes.
Mr. Blake?
Yes.
Mr. Donovan?
Yes.
Ordinance number 20-0-100 has been approved. Ordinance number 20-0-101.
An ordinance authorizing the city manager to award a bid contract to DB Bentley, Inc. for the Stockbridge and Dartmoor Storm Sewer Improvements Project and declaring an emergency.
Mr. Flippier.
Thank you, Mr. President. And again, this is another project that we're really pleased to see move forward. This will provide some drainage relief to 2 neighborhoods in Ward 2 that have needed this for quite some time. These are both funded through an OPWC grant as well. Mr. Swigger.
Thank you, Mr. Filipiak. 11 bids were opened November 13th for the Stockbridge Dartmoor Storm Sewer Improvements Project. The project will remove approximately 1,700 linear feet of existing 12-inch storm sewer on Stockbridge Road and Dartmoor Road, replace it with new 24 and 30-inch storm sewer. Project will also install approximately 760 feet of new 30 and 36-inch storm sewer on Menor Avenue. The bids range from a low bid of approximately $748,000 to a high bid of approximately $998,000, as compared to the opinion of probable construction cost of $875,000. The low bid was received from DB Bentley Incorporated of Paynesville, Ohio, whose bid was found to be in conformance with all contract requirements. Therefore, recommended that the contract be awarded to DB Bentley Incorporated in the amount of $747,970. It's anticipated the work will begin this winter or early spring in February or March, and with a completion date of the end of May. And the project did receive a grant of $150,000 and a loan of $150,000 from the Ohio Public Works Commission. Thank you.
Move to suspend.
Second.
Please call the roll.
Mrs. Dowling?
Yes.
Mr. Kirchner?
Yes.
Mr. Krieger?
Yes.
Mr. Landig?
Yes.
Mr. Marne?
Yes.
Mr. Blake?
Yes.
Mr. Donovan?
Yes.
Move to approve.
Second.
Please call the roll.
Mrs. Dowling?
Yes.
Mr. Kirchner?
Yes.
Mr. Krieger?
Yes.
Mr. Landig?
Yes.
Mr. Marne?
Yes.
Mr. Blake?
Yes.
Mr. Donovan?
Thank you and yes.
Ordinance number 20-0-101 has been approved. Ordinance number 20-0-102.
An ordinance authorizing the city manager to enter into a contract with Sutphen Corporation for the purchase of one 1500 GPM fire rescue engine and declaring an emergency.
Mr. Flippia.
Thank you, Mr. President. Chief Searles, please.
Thank you, Mr. Filipiak, members of council. As you know, the fire levy funding was approved in the 2020 budget for the replacement of a fire engine at station number 3. That engine is 1133. 1133 is a 2007 Pierce with 130,000 miles on it. It'll go into reserve when the new engine comes in to replace 1154, which is a 22-year-old fire engine. We evaluated several manufacturers, including some of the top manufacturers, which are Pierce, Rosenbauer, and Sutphen. Sutphen offered the lowest price and is based out of Columbus, Ohio. But most our fleets are Sutphens. They've served us well for the past 16 years. This will be a custom fire engine. It is a rescue engine. It'll be purchased on the state term schedule. It was priced under budget at a cost of $581,797. $97. And the time to build is 12 to 14 months. That's a little longer than past engines have taken to build, but the manufacturer says that's related to COVID. And I just want to take a quick minute to thank you and the residents for affording us good reserve apparatus. As you can imagine, today was a busy day. We had all of our fleet out on the road, and it's good to have dependable reserve apparatus for days like today, and this happens several times a year. So I'd be happy to answer any questions that you may have. Thank you.
Move to suspend.
Second.
Please call the roll.
Mrs. Dowling?
Yes.
Mr. Kirchner?
Yes.
Mr. Krieger?
Yes.
Mr. Landig?
Yes.
Mr. Marne? Where'd he go? Mr. Marne?
He's muted.
Mr. President, there seems to be some indication that he may have lost bandwidth.
So,
Okay, what's your recommendation, Mr. Law Director?
He may have virtually left the meeting. I don't know if you can wait a minute or two to see if he can reestablish a connection. I know with the environmental conditions we've got, internet connections have been.
I'm sorry, Mr. Zeman, to interrupt you. Councilperson Marne just lost power at his home, so he's reloading.
Okay. Mr. President, again, if you can wait a few minutes, he may be able to reestablish a connection. Otherwise, he's effectively left the meeting.
Then we just, Mr. Zeman, we can just continue then with the vote, right? Majority?
You can, if Mr. President, if you choose to, continue on with the meeting, that's certainly your prerogative. It's the nature of the technology, I suppose.
Let's continue with the roll.
Mr. Blake?
Yes.
Mr. Donovan?
Yes.
Move to approve.
Second.
Please call the roll.
Mrs. Dowling?
Yes.
Mr. Kirchner?
Yes.
Mr. Krieger?
Yes.
Mr. Landig?
Yes.
Still not there. Mr. Blake?
Yes.
Mr. Donovan?
Chief, I know you were busy today. I heard all your trucks out there at the same time. I bet you're ready for bed. Thank you and yes.
Ordinance number 20-0-102 has been approved. Resolution number 20-R-127.
A resolution authorizing the city manager to file an application and enter into an agreement with the Ohio Public Works Commission for the purpose of acquiring funds through the State Capital Improvement Program for the Chillicothe Road resurfacing project and declaring an emergency.
Mr. Flippia.
Thank you, Mr. President. And this resolution and then the following three, each are resolutions required for us to put put our final applications in for round 33 for Ohio Public Works Commission projects. We feel pretty comfortable that at least 2 of these and potentially all 4 of them will receive either full or partial funding from our requests. So we're asking council to provide approval for each of the 4. The first, Mr. Swigger, did you want to make any quick mention? We went into these in some detail with council. So if you have any questions, Mr. Swigger's happy to answer those.
Move to suspend.
Second.
Please call the roll.
Mrs. Dowling?
Yes.
Mr. Kirchner?
Yes.
Mr. Krieger?
Yes.
Mr. Landig?
Yes?
Mr. Marne?
Yes.
Mr. Blake?
Yes.
Mr. Donovan?
Yes.
Move to approve.
Second.
Please call the roll.
Mrs. Dowling?
Yes.
Mr. Kirchner?
Yes.
Mr. Krieger?
Yes.
Mr. Landig?
Yes.
Mr. Marne?
Yes.
Mr. Blake?
Yes.
Mr. Donovan?
Yes.
Resolution number 20-R-127 has been adopted. Resolution number 20-R-128.
A resolution authorizing the city manager to file an application and enter into an agreement with the Ohio Public Works Commission for the purpose of acquiring funds through the State Capital Improvement Program for the Edge Hill Road Culvert Replacement and Lakeshore Boulevard Storm Sewer Project and declaring an emergency.
And so what's your pleasure?
Move to suspend.
Second.
Please call the roll.
Mrs. Dowling?
Yes.
Mr. Kirchner?
Yes.
Mr. Krieger?
Yes.
Mr. Landig?
Yes.
Mr. Marne?
Yes.
Mr. Blake?
Yes.
Mr. Donovan?
Yes.
Move to approve.
Second.
Please call the roll.
Mrs. Dowling?
Yes.
Mr. Kirchner?
Yes.
Mr. Krieger?
Yes.
Mr. Landig?
Yes.
Mr. Marne? Mr. Marne?
Yes.
Mr. Blake?
Yes.
Mr. Donovan?
Yes.
Resolution number 20-R-128 has been adopted. Resolution number 20-R-129.
Resolution authorizing the city manager to file an application and enter into an agreement with the Ohio Public Works Commission for the purpose of acquiring funds through the State Capital Improvement Program for the Menor Avenue Culvert Repair at Claridge House Apartments project and declaring an emergency.
Move to suspend.
Second.
Please call the roll.
Mrs. Dowling?
Yes.
Mr. Kirchner?
Yes.
Mr. Krieger?
Yes.
Mr. Landig?
Yes.
Mr. Marne?
Yes.
Mr. Blake?
Yes.
Mr. Donovan?
Yes.
Move to approve.
Second.
Please call the roll.
Mrs. Dowling?
Yes.
Mr. Kirchner?
Yes.
Mr. Krieger?
Yes.
Mr. Landig?
Yes.
Mr. Marne?
Yes.
Mr. Blake?
Yes.
Mr. Donovan?
Yes.
Resolution number 20-R-129 has been adopted. Resolution number 20-R-130.
A resolution authorizing the city manager to file an application and enter into an agreement with the Ohio Public Works Commission for the purpose of acquiring funds through the State Capital Improvement Program for the Brooksdale Road Reconstruction Project and declaring an emergency.
Mr. President, I would move to amend this ordinance to include that the section 4, that the city manager is hereby authorized to enter into a cooperation agreement with the Lake County Department of Utilities for capital improvements for Brooksdale Road Reconstruction Project, and that the city manager is authorized to sign an agreement.
Second.
Please call the roll.
Mrs. Dowling?
Yes.
Mr. Kirchner?
Yes.
Mr. Krieger?
Yes.
Mr. Landig?
Yes.
Mr. Marne?
Yes.
Mr. Blake?
Yes.
Mr. Donovan?
Yes.
Move to suspend as amended.
Second.
Please call the roll.
Mrs. Dowling?
Yes.
Mr. Kirchner?
Yes.
Mr. Krieger?
Yes, of course.
Mr. Landig?
Yes.
Mr. Marne?
Yes.
Mr. Blake?
Yes.
Mr. Donovan?
Yes.
And finally, my last amendment of the night. Move to approve as amended.
Second.
Please call the roll.
Mrs. Dowling?
Yes.
Mr. Kirchner?
Yes.
Mr. Krieger?
Yes.
Mr. Landig?
Yes.
Mr. Marne?
Yes.
Mr. Blake?
Yes.
Mr. Donovan?
Yes.
Resolution number 20-R-130 has been adopted. Second reading, ordinance number 20-O-087.
An ordinance authorizing the city manager to execute a tax increment financing agreement with Omni SLF Mentor LLC related to the construction of senior living facilities and declaring an emergency.
Mr. Zeman, you have not heard from the applicant?
That's correct, Mr. President. Don't have any explanation. Again, it was represented that they had changes that were non-substantive, just to clarify something, and they have not gotten back in touch with us.
Council, what's your pleasure?
Mr. Zeman, could we move to table this?
You could just pass it on to third reading, or
Move to pass it on to third reading.
Second.
Please call the roll.
Mrs. Dowling?
Yes.
Mr. Kirchner?
Yes.
Mr. Krieger?
Yes.
Mr. Landig?
Yes.
Mr. Marne?
Yes.
Mr. Blake?
Yes.
Mr. Donovan?
Yes.
Ordinance number 20-0-087 has received its third reading. Third reading, there are none. Manager's report, Mr. Flippia.
Thank you, Mr. President, members of council. Council, we do have one pavement open cut request from Aqua, Ohio at 7775 Little Mountain Road for a new water service line for residential development.
Move to approve.
Please call the roll.
Ms. Dowling?
Yes.
Mr. Kirchner?
Yes.
Mr. Krieger?
Yes.
Mr. Landig?
Yes.
Mr. Marne?
Yes.
Mr. Blake?
Yes.
Mr. Donovan?
Yes.
I always look to the ward councilman first to make sure.
Excuse me. That is on the west side.
It's on that side of
Your side.
Well, it's
crosses
coming
over
from
your
mine,
side,
but
though.
it's digging on your
Starts on
side
my
of the
side.
street.
Well,
On that side of the street.
We appreciate the cooperation from both boards. Thank you, council. Just a few items this evening. We do have obviously, with our first big snow of the year, winter's here. All our crews are obviously working, and we'd certainly appreciate the patience of our public. We will be placing a parking ban in effect, start beginning this evening. So we will have that posted on our website as well. Waste Management has discontinued its operations earlier today, so they will start up again tomorrow. So they'll be about a half day behind the rest of this week. So obviously, if you normally get your pickup in the morning, you'll get it in the afternoon. You know, if those who get this message, we appreciate they don't call in with those requests, they will get to it. According to First Energy's website, approximately 15% of the Mentor customers of their Mentor customers are without power as of earlier today, myself included. Mr. Kirchner fell into that category, and it sounds like Councilman Marne has as well very recently. So we continue to seek out updates, but we encourage our residents to first consult FE's website. They will give you the best firsthand information on that. I mentioned this earlier, but it's worth mentioning again. The Mentor Police Department is beginning a brand new undercover patrol detail aimed at apprehending porch pirates in our community. And part of that will include surveillance in multiple neighborhoods, as well as patrols by unmarked vehicles that will occur citywide. So their efforts are appreciated, but we also ask our residents to do their part by trying their best to bring packages in as quickly as they can, working with their neighbors if they know they're going to be away for some time, and certainly taking advantage of the many different video cameras and door cameras that are available today. That certainly helps us, and we appreciate cooperation with our residents when we do have incidents. We do have several new businesses to announce. The Happy Cloud Smoke Shop at 6162 Meadowbrook Drive. Zappatelli's Detail Store at 8806 Mentor Avenue. Vitrio Retinal Consultants at 8140 Norton Parkway. And Perry O'Donnell Associates Incorporated, also at 8140 Norton Parkway. So we appreciate their investment in the community, and we wish them great success here. Also, council, just on behalf of the entire city administration, we want to wish council and our residents a very Merry Christmas and a Happy New Year. And I think we can all agree that New Year cannot come soon enough. So that's all.
Clerk's correspondence. Julie?
Nothing to report.
Mission,
Scott.
Oh, Scott, yes.
Mr. Flipiak, sorry about that. But Mr. Flipiak, I want to thank you and your staff on behalf of myself and the rest of the council. 2020 has been one hell of a year, for lack of better words, and we came through it in great fashion. And just dealing with Mr. Malinowski and the rest of this administration with our budget, you know, it doesn't take just 1 year to get where we're at. It's taken many, more like 5 or 10. And biggest fear is that what's going to happen in the future, because this is unprecedented. But if 2021, if we all work together, just like we did in 2020, I'm sure it's going to be a great success. So thank you and the administration and all of City Hall.
Thank you, Councilman.
Committee reports. There are none. Old business. New business. Hearing none. Persons before council. We have none.
Move to adjourn, Mr. President.
Second. This meeting is adjourned.